Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and joining me today is County Board Chair Christian Dorsey. We're going to be taking a closer look at the key actions the board took at its April meeting, actions that can have a big impact on you, your neighborhood, and our community. Christian, thanks for being here, as always. Now, of course, this was a big meeting with the adoption of the budget, so let's dive right in. What were the highlights with the budget actions?
Well, the top line, Kara, is that the board unanimously approved a $1.4 billion balanced budget. In order to do so, we did have to increase the real estate tax rate 2 cents. That's significantly less than what we advertised at a 2.75 cents increase. But this was necessary because we had incredible needs, particularly from our public schools. And in fact, 1.5 of the 2 cents is devoted to meeting the gap that our public schools presented to us. Fortunately, we were able to maintain the tax rate increase for county services to the ½ cent that the manager recommended, which required finding $2 million for Metro funding. That was a need that we had, but we were able to figure out how to trim our budget so that we could accommodate that within the manager's proposal. And generally, we were able to fund all the things that make Arlington work as a community, and that means maintaining our investments in affordable housing. It also meant listening to our community, who presented some deep concerns about some of the proposed cuts to arts and cultural affairs. So while I am happy that we're able to provide a continuity of great services for Arlington, we recognize that a tax rate increase certainly can cause a hardship for some.
Now, you did mention some of the proposed cuts, and we've been talking the last couple of months how this was going to be a very lean budget year because of some of the extenuating circumstances with the real estate vacancy rate, that kind of thing that we're facing right now. But will the public notice any changes as a result of some of those proposed cuts, or will we be able to alleviate some of those issues?
Well, generally, I think to most of our public, they will see a continuation of the great services that Arlington is known for. So what we were able to do was find a lot of savings that are not going to affect the delivery of most of our core and essential services. So that's the great thing for our community. But we've also been working very hard to make sure that we find every dollar possible that will be used to work productively for Arlingtonians so that we could limit that tax rate increase, because certainly while Arlington is overall very well positioned, we certainly recognize that some people face economic hardships, and we want to reduce that burden as much as possible.
Now, you did mention the majority of the tax rate increase funding is going to go towards schools.
That's right.
And actually, it ends up being more than the manager had originally proposed.
Right. That's right.
What was the need behind that?
Well, so we asked the manager in constructing the budget to make sure he accounted for enrollment growth as well as the new school programs that were going to be opening in September of this year. And he was able to do that. But when the school board put together their budget, they found needs in above and in excess of that. And they presented a compelling case that their investments in making sure that students' emotional health needs were met, making sure that they don't have to cut some of the wonderful opportunities that create for a more equitable school system. They presented a case that they needed more funding for that, and fortunately we were able to scrub the budget, modify a tax rate increase so that we could meet those needs.
And how about the public input? There was a lot of opportunities for the public to make their voices heard, and as Arlingtonians routinely do, they did in fact make their voices heard. What were some of the things you did hear from the community that perhaps helped to shape the final budget?
Well, we certainly heard a lot about arts and cultural affairs. The manager's original proposal dramatically changed the county's investment in those efforts. And once we heard from our public and the board chewed it over, we realized that there wasn't enough of a plan to transition from where we are to something that's a lot more efficient along the lines of what the manager proposed. So we've decided to challenge the manager to deliver the same level of services, some less money devoted to them, but generally we want to make sure we continue our investment in arts and cultural affairs, because that produces such a great return to Arlingtonians overall. And this will lead to a path of, I think, greater sustainability in our arts and cultural affairs funding.
And, as you set those guidelines for the manager looking forward, kind of looking into your crystal ball a little bit as we move forward, of course, with the announcement of Amazon, we're going to see some of that additional revenue down the line.
Yeah.
But in the near term, the next year or two, say, are these things that Arlingtonians are going to have to get used to?
I think so. The Amazon is going to have a very gradual build out in Arlington, so we can't expect any huge revenue windfalls from that right away. But already we've seen greater health in the commercial real estate market than we had predicted a year before. So if that trend continues, these lean, tough budget years will become less lean and less tough. And that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that we're not going to sharpen our pencils just like we did this year, next year, but I do hope some of that great pressure will be relieved a little bit so that we can get toward where I want to be, where we can have a budget that meets our needs, makes good strategic investments in the future, while keeping the tax rate manageable for people so that they get a lot of value for their tax dollars.
All right. Well, on that note, we are going to take a short break. And when we return, we'll talk about some of the many other actions the board took at its April meeting. Stay with us. Hello again, I'm Kara O'Donnell, your host for County Board Wrap-Up. With me today is County Board Chair Christian Dorsey, who's highlighting some of the key decisions the board made at its April meeting. Now, of course, we just finished talking about the budget, but it was a jam-packed meeting this month. And there was a very kind of exciting new initiative that called Housing Arlington. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the key features behind that?
Well, housing has been an issue in our community for decades, really, and making sure that we can provide a range of affordable options for people who earn a variety of incomes in our community is a fundamental Arlington priority. However, even though we've been talking about this for a long time, this initiative is to send a clear signal that business as usual is no longer going to be the way that we approach housing. We've traditionally had tools where we have invested in the creation of subsidized units for our lowest income and most vulnerable Arlingtonians. That will continue, and in fact, in the budget, we increased that investment. But that alone is not enough to deal with our housing challenges. We have to increase the range of affordable options for people who earn less than $70,000 up to $140,000, because if you fall within that income range, finding housing in Arlington is an extreme challenge, and maintaining your housing is an extreme challenge. So we are going to explore a range of tools, including encouraging different forms of housing that are more affordable by design, that don't encourage public subsidy, working with the business community and the philanthropic community to preserve more housing units, something that has been very difficult with our traditional tools. So in short, Kara, we're going to be exploring a whole new range of policies and financing tools and partnerships so that we can actually start solving this problem instead of just treading water. And one of the other key features of Housing Arlington, we recognize that this is not something that we can do alone. We have to work cooperatively with our regional partners because it is a regional issue. And until we address housing supply from the regional level, we really won't be able to improve affordability at the local level.
Why now?
It's been past time. So why now is because it would have been much better years ago, but there is no better time than now. So we are certainly encouraged by the attention that the region now has with Amazon coming, that we need to address some of these core issues lest they get worse. So we're taking advantage of that energy. We're taking advantage of that spirit of regional cooperation, and we're going to be a leader in making sure we deliver the kind of community that provides opportunities for everybody.
And what's kind of the time frame we're looking at before we see some of those recommendations, maybe some of the, fruits of our labor from this initiative, so to speak?
Well, we have low-hanging fruit that's going to be before the board next month, where we look at how to permit more affordable forms with something that we've talked about before, accessory dwellings. So Housing Arlington is going to certainly encompass all of the work that we have been doing, but then as we deploy new tools and strategies, that will happen on an ongoing basis over the preceding months and then in the near term over the next couple of years. There's going to be a lot of housing activity that will be before the board, that will be discussed in our community. This is going to be an umbrella initiative that very much is a priority for everything that we do.
And something that has been much needed for quite some time.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, of course, it was a very busy meeting, and the board addressed not only its operational budget for the coming year and that sweeping housing initiative, it also took a final vote on a master plan for our parks and open spaces. Now, this has been in the works for more than 2 years now, I would say.
More than 3, I believe,
Oh, my goodness.
Kara.
So what happened at the meeting?
So we adopted the Public Spaces Master Plan, another unanimous vote, which really is appropriate given the amount of community engagement that we had in bringing together our commitment to making sure public spaces are provided in adequate supply, but also that we provide the diverse array of opportunities that Arlingtonians want. We're talking about sports fields. We're talking about casual use space. We're talking about natural, biophilic environments. Arlingtonians want, deserve, and need it all. And even though we're space constrained with only 26 square miles, we've done a pretty terrific job of making parks and open space a priority. And this takes it to the next level with some very clear policy direction for the future for making sure all Arlingtonians can be accommodated.
And is this a big departure from kind of our usual, outlook on open spaces and green space in the county?
I wouldn't call it a departure. I would call it a maturation. I would call it stepping up our game, recognizing that this is something that, through purposeful planning and implementation, we can really address some of the core concerns that people have had, whether it be not enough playing fields for people who do athletics, but then combined with the more casual use spaces that I've talked about that can allow for non-athletes, seniors, very small children to enjoy our open space in a way that promotes community health, environmental sustainability. These are all very good things. And while, again, we've done a good job overall, we realized that there was room to even do better. And this plan really takes all of our best thinking and sets us on a direction for the next few years where we can do that and keep Arlington among the most venerated communities for providing parks and open space.
All right. Well, another issue, a board adopted a resolution that has been in the news in the last couple of years, a bit controversial, with the renaming of Jefferson Davis Highway. Talk to me about how that came about, what you heard from residents.
So, Jefferson Davis Highway, just a little background in history. The road was named that, Route 1, it was named Jefferson Davis Highway in 1922 during a very different time in our country when people who were very much disappointed at the outcome of the Civil War and wanting to impose 19th century norms of supremacy and subjugation of people of color, wanted to show their power by having public spaces named after Confederate leaders. And that was what was done with Route 1. And here we are nearly 100 years later, and we have a very different ethos in our country, in our community. And the board, not just this board, but prior county boards have long sought the authority to rename the road on a few different grounds. One, that doesn't reflect who we are. Two, local communities ought to have the ability to name the public spaces within their jurisdiction. And then three, we have this road, which is contiguous with the same road in Alexandria and Fairfax, and it's Richmond Highway along those stretches. And it makes a lot of sense from a mobility standpoint to have continuity here in Arlington.
So, you adopted the resolution. Did you hear from the community on what they wanted with the road?
We did, and we heard from people who live along Route 1. We heard from people who are just generally interested in the topic overall. And overwhelmingly, but certainly not unanimously, people absolutely applaud this effort. Believe that Jefferson Davis does not represent something that is a part of Arlington. Also believe in the idea of having continuity with our neighboring jurisdictions. And we heard from stakeholders as varied as apartment residents along the road, businesses along the road, hotels, our umbrella business improvement district, who all spoke very clearly at thinking that this was very much past time.
Okay, and so is that it then? We can rename? Do we need to get this approved by the state? Where does it go?
So the board has made its stated intent and done what needs to be done under the processes in Virginia. And we have submitted a resolution to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So this is a body that's chaired by the Secretary of Transportation. And they will consider it at an upcoming meeting. We don't quite yet know when that meeting will be. Could be as soon as May, but it's up to them. And they have the ultimate authority to grant our request for the name change. We expect and hope that they will favorably act upon our recommendation, but it's important to note that our action did not effectuate the name change. It just simply allowed us, or created the request for the CTB. And then if they grant it, we will make sure that we fully socialize this with all stakeholders with an intent to have the name officially changed by October 1st.
Okay, but at the end of the day, it is still a state highway, so
Correct.
It still needs to be approved there. And one final thing before we wrap up, this is a little bit of a change in recycling. And it's one that is also not without its controversy, the fact that we will not be able to recycle glass.
Yeah.
What is the history here? Why is this an issue?
Well, I want people to be very clear that this is not Arlington choosing not to recycle glass. Markets determine what is recycled, and for a while there has been a collapse in the market for recycling glass, to the extent that no glass is actually being recycled when it's picked up in our blue containers. It's actually manually sorted from those blue containers and taken to a landfill. It's thrown away. So we have that current circumstance combined with the fact that it costs more to do that, because the process of sorting from the blue and then transmitting to a landfill has caused our cost for recycling to go up. And we've made the unfortunate but completely rational economic decision that Arlingtonians need to treat glass differently. So we recommend a few different things. The first thing you can do as someone who's concerned in the community is to use less glass. And if you can reduce the amount of glass that you consume, that's better. Then we'd love for people to reuse it themselves. Through repurposing for whatever their needs are. If they can't do that, then we want them to take it to a drop-off center. We have 2 currently. We're going to bring more to the county, but those drop-off centers will allow the glass to be pulverized into sand and then repurposed into construction materials. But if they're not going to do any of those things, it's better overall to just simply put it in the black cart, because that's where it ends up, even if you put it in the blue.
Now, I guess we've always heard that, glass was one of the early things you could recycle. Back when you still had to look at the number that was on the plastic container to see which things were able to be recycled. What obviously out of Arlington County's jurisdiction, but overall, what is the change coming from that is making glass no longer able to be recycled?
Well, so one of the things is that glass requires the ability to be cleaned before it can be recycled, and the commodity market for that has just completely shriveled up. No one's doing it. So without that commodity market, then you don't actually have glass as a recyclable, and it ends up in landfills. And this is a global thing. So every jurisdiction in the region, every jurisdiction in the country is dealing with the same thing.
So just the easiest thing right now is either take it to a drop-off center.
Absolutely.
Or just put it in the regular trash.
Consume less. That's the thing that we can all do. Reuse when possible. Take it to a drop-off center. We have 2, one in Central Arlington, one in South Arlington, and then we have a goal of bringing 3 more online so that we'll have every household within 2 miles of a recycling drop-off, a glass drop-off center, and then hopefully that captures most of it. But if there's any left, then it needs to go in the black cart.
Okay, good advice there. And that's going to bring us to the end for this month's County Board wrap-up. We've gotten some insight from the board chair today into the board's decision-making process. Thanks, Christian, as always, for being with us this month.
Kara.
And of course, join us again next month when we'll meet with board members to talk about the actions from the May board meeting. Remember, all of the county board meetings are open to the public, and then they're live streamed and archived on our website. That's arlingtonva.us, and just search County Board. And of course, if you want to tell us what you think about these and other issues, you can visit the county website at topics.arlingtonva.us/engage. Until then, enjoy springtime in Arlington. We'll see you next time.